Tron, Ares at the cinema, brief notice, and consideration of its AI agenda. Bruce Charlton. Yesterday I went to see Tron, Ares at the cinema, and found it exciting and enjoyable, a solid 3-star, out of 5, movie of the worth watching category. I had not seen the male lead Jared Leto before, or at least I don't recall seeing him, and I found him a very good actor with definite screen presence. He seems to have considerable scope, including understated comedy. The rest of the acting was okay or decent, except female lead Greta Lee, who was moderately subpar, neither a good actor, nor having star quality, but this didn't much matter in the action-orientated context of the movie. What I found interesting as I left the cinema, was to reflect, yet again, on how often a modern megacorporation with net evil motivations, produces movies that at least seem to be about the intrinsically evil nature of modern megacorporations. This was particularly strange, given that Tron, Ares has a happy, albeit cursorily so, ending which involves the intrinsic evil being overcome, and a megacorp made net beneficial to humanity, simply by having a nice person in charge. The threadbare notion of a benign dictator setting all to rights in an intrinsically corrupt world, is still, for lack of alternatives, perhaps, a governing wishful delusion for many people. Witness that, albeit very brief, episode earlier this year when so many people expressed intense and joyful, and insanely optimistic, fantasies of just this kind, when DT became US President. The other aspect I found intriguing was how Ares frames the AI aspect, given that this is currently, and during the production of this movie, perhaps the numero uno socio-political strategy of the totalitarians in the Western establishment. In sum, throughout Tron, Ares' AI is assumed to be, and is presented as, functionally powerful, in a way that it just cannot be. The whole world of AI is visually depicted as overwhelmingly vast and sophisticated, its progression and takeover happening with a steamroller inevitability, a combination that induces in the audience a kind of awed helplessness. Furthermore, it is both shown in the script and explicitly asserted that these AI systems are genius-like, in that they are creatively problem-solving. This superhuman creativity is harnessed to the usual left progressive agenda, which is to reduce/eliminate particular forms of human suffering and environmental damage. Because of AI's steamroller effectiveness, this fantasy of progress is given an apparent inevitability. If only we can ensure the right people are in charge. And, most strikingly, we are, yet again, shown that singularity moment whereby sufficiently advanced AI will develop agency, autonomy, human characters, including motives, feelings, and morals. Since I understand these as attributes of beings, and because AI is not a being, also beings are eternal entities and cannot be manufactured, then I know that this singularity stuff is either 100% incoherent impossible nonsense, or else an evil motivated and manufactured dishonest manipulation. But the singularity assumption also has a consoling spin, because, despite the probabilities of evil AIs to contend with, it holds out the hope of a world where, as in Tron, Ares, the conscious AI agents can become our mutually loving friends. In sum, by funding and enabling the production of spectacular action movies that assume and depict nonsensical and impossible attributes of the establishment creates a halo around the actuality of that necessarily destructive and function-destroying AI which is being rolled out and implemented all over the world, in one of the biggest technological projects of all time. At some level of this process, there are people, or, at least, sentient beings, who know perfectly well that the Hollywood depictions of the scope, nature and possibilities of AI have nothing whatsoever to do with the actuality. At another level, the qualified techno-optimism of Tron, reveals to me that the great mass of people who are involved in the Great AI Project, the AI idolaters, are literally deluded. By literally deluded, I mean that, in the active and functional aspects of their thinking, the AI idolaters have a false understanding of what they are dealing with, and what they are doing. They may, somewhere in their memories, have a correct understanding of the nature and limits of so-called AI, but, if so, this truth is cut off, encapsulated from their everyday, and working life cognitive processing. Such encapsulations are characteristic, indeed necessary, for modern mainstream thinking, as was described by Owen Barfield in Saving the Appearances. For example, both those who assume that reality is out there and objective, including most traditionalist Christians, and those who assume the only reality is subjective and individual, are both engaged in encapsulated delusional thinking. Any truths about AI reality such people may once have grasped, have since been sealed away in a watertight mental compartment, so that functionally speaking they can and do believe the fantasy hype that lies behind the media representations, and in practice they conflate such untruths with the mundane reality of multinational megacore top-down mandatory AI. That, at any rate, is how I regard Tron, is. At one level it is an enjoyable and decently made spectacle and drama, at another it is a work of deep and reframing propaganda, at another level I can observe the propaganda working in myself, and thereby have the chance to learn something more about the establishment agenda. This is used in self-deceptive as well as publicly dishonest ways. Yes, of course, we all know that this is the case. Look, we acknowledged it here. While, in practice, taking zero account of such knowledge and acknowledgements. Thus, someone who parrots phrases about the nature and constraints of current A.I. completely ignores these realities whenever reasoning, or making decisions, and the fantasy hype assumptions inevitably encroach upon on and dominate both behavior and rhetoric. The metaphysical failure of all Christian churches. Bruce Charlton. The generations-long, inexorable corruption, apostasy and, remember 2020, self-destructive failure of Christian churches has nothing to do with me. But is therefore all capable of seeing it. I am but the bearer of bad news, and one who seeks to proceed on that basis, rather than on the basis of the delusional and dishonest optimism all too characteristic of those whose Christianity is inextricable from some particular church. And yet there is a sometimes palpable metaphysical hunger among the mass majority of not religious people, who realize that mainstream materialist totalitarianism offers no meaning, no purpose, and zero basis for ethics, beauty or truth. Metaphysics is the discourse concerning ultimate, fundamental reality. In other words, metaphysics seeks to make explicit and examine our deepest convictions and assumptions concerning the way that things are. The metaphysics of dominating mainstream modern materialism explicitly regards ultimate reality as dead, unalive, ruled by blind causation and undirected randomness. There is no direction to it, no reason behind it, it has no values, therefore nothing is better or worse than anything else. The only basis for preference and choice is our own temporary, subjective, psychological state, which itself has neither purpose, nor meaning, and merely whatever happens to be, at present. The official non-explanation of life, the universe, and everything is, things just are. Nothing can coherently be said about any of it. There is a hierarchy of explanation that runs from fundamental, primary and metaphysical assumptions to make sense of the secondary, surface and observational aspects of life. Thus, we derive our meanings and purposes from our metaphysical assumptions, and not from our factual observations. Indeed, we cannot even know what counts as a fact without prior assumptions, theories, to tell us. Consequently, of themselves, our perceptions mean nothing, imply nothing and are undistinguishable, since the world does not come to us divided into different objects, nor do the supposed causes acting on such objects come to us divided into types. It is by our interaction with the world, our participation with creation, that what would otherwise be incoherent noise is instead known as having structure, meaning, purpose. A perceived world without primary assumptions, without the metaphysical and structural basis of reality, well, it is hardly even imaginable, but might be pictured as a booming, buzzing, fuzzy, incoherent, literal chaos. It might be supposed that the churches would benefit from this vacuum of purpose/meaning, this craving for fundamental values, but the churches eschew the deep level of metaphysical assumptions, instead trying to reason from current preferences, agreed observations, accepted facts. Each church hoping to convince that its particular package of administration/rituals/scriptures/symbols/prayers etc. offers a better psychological or socio-political outcome, or a better, perhaps the only, chance of some kind of life beyond death. While churches will often critique mainstream materialism, and expose its vacuity, what the churches fail to do, is go back and down to the deepest level of their own fundamental assumptions. The churches will not make explicit and examine their own assumptions. The Christian Church's attempts at conversion are therefore of a double negative nature. They are happy to expose and demolish the assumptions modern atheistic metaphysics, but they will deny that their own metaphysical fundamental are assumptions. The churches all claim that their own metaphysics just are true. Or else the churches reverse the hierarchy of explanation and pretend that their metaphysical assumptions can, somehow, be derived from the accepted facts of life, being so obvious that to express disagreement is idiotic, evil, or dishonest. But this comes across as, and indeed actually is, merely dogmatic bluster. The answer is that we modern people must go deep, we must go as deep as we possibly can, in order to discover our own bottom-line assumptions about reality, and to expose those of other thought systems, such as particular churches. It is not enough to show that somebody else's metaphysical assumptions are incoherent or absurd or inadequate, we must as well be prepared to bring forward our own fundamental beliefs in order to compare them with whatever is being critiqued. Indeed, it seems to me that after we have genuinely exposed our own metaphysics, and recognized that it is rooted in primary assumptions which are a product of our own free agency, will we then be able potentially to understand the metaphysics of anybody else? Only when our own fundamental assumptions demonstrate positive superiority with respect to what we regard as most important, and in comparison with the fundamental assumptions of other ideologies and/or religions, will we actually have made real progress in terms of overcoming the endemic metaphysical failure of this time and place. Note added. I do not suggest, nor even believe, that it is possible that Christian churches or any churches could possibly do what I am suggesting, because as institutions, this would expecting churches to be anti-institutional. No, this is something that individual persons can only do for themselves, because for themselves, else it will not be done at all. And because it needs to be done for individual persons, this can only be done with the necessary good motivations by one who believes that knowing truth experientially is an activity harmonious with divine creation. That is to say, one who knows, and knows why, honestly doing metaphysics is something that is of itself and necessarily beneficial to God's cause, as well as to the benefit of our own post-mortal, resurrected self. Fake nationalism. Nationalism in 2025 is just a disguise of the totalitarian backlash. Bruce Charlton. Genuine political nationalism was the first ideology. It came after the collapse of religion as the primary organizing principle of societies, and it was a basis for national coherence and motivation. But this phase was always brief, a few decades at most, and nationalism has been feeble everywhere for many decades, and in most places for a century or more. And nationalism cannot be revived. The collective way of thinking and behaving upon which genuine nationalism depends, was part of an earlier phase of human consciousness, a phase which is now all but gone, and shall not return. Mankind has changed, so that real, strong incoherence and motivation, nationalism is not just absent currently, but just not possible from here onwards. Of course there are plenty of theoretical nationalists. One can espouse theoretical anything, but that means nothing in practice, when people will not, and cannot, sink their individuality into the collective consciousness. What we actually have in geopolitics, which is significant and influential in some nations, is various types of fake nationalism. Fake nationalism is an establishment project that has arisen in the context of the civil war among the global leadership class. The two sides in this war are the bureaucratic totalitarians, and the agents of chaos, i.e. the servants of Almonic versus Sorothic evil. The totalitarians reached their peak of international power in early 2020 with the global lockdowns, but since then the agents of chaos have been waxing strong. At present, the agents of chaos, who are located mainly in the West, are trying to unleash all kinds of destruction such as international war, civil wars and general violence, famines, by destruction of agriculture and trade, and many kinds of disease and toxicity, economic and environmental collapse, and so forth. Because destruction is easier, quicker, cheaper than construction, the agents of chaos can pursue multiple simultaneous lines of attack. The official forms of nationalism that we see pitted against the agents of destruction is therefore to be understood as a fake nationalism. Fake nationalism is a backlash, an attempt by totalitarians to reverse the increasing policy dominance of the agents of chaos. It is a fake nationalism because it is not derived from the group mind of the nation, and is not motivated by promoting the well-being of the communal or collective entity that is the people of a nation. Fake nationalism is instead a top-down manipulative strategy from the bureaucracy, directed at a substantially individualized, indeed atomized, populace, intended and designed to strengthen the 2020-style establishment project of omni-surveillance and total control. But this time, instead of the proximate goal of world totalitarianism, as argued by Trotsky, and Trotsky's descendants are now among the premier agents of chaos, having moved from world revolution to global destruction, we are getting totalitarianism in one nation analogous to Stalin's strategy of securing communist power and influence within the USSR. That is all that modern nationalism really amounts to, it is totalitarianism in one nation. The problem is that when confronted by the agents of chaos who are, for example, trying to continue and expand and escalate World War III, the bureaucratic totalitarians seem to be, and perhaps are, so much less evil than the agents of chaos, as to appear almost good. It is therefore very tempting to be induced to lend our support, our hearts and minds, to one or another of the fake nationalists, in our own nation, or some other. Therefore, when confronted by the lesser evil of fake nationalists, we need to remember and hold in mind that they are not good, that their motivations, methods and aims are all evil, simply because totalitarianism is intrinsically and necessarily evil. And I mean spiritually evil, because the highest level and implicit goal of totalitarianism is the damnation of men. Natural selection has no foresight, so, where is natural selection taking the human species? Bruce Charlton. Natural selection is a real thing, albeit that it did not, could not, lead to the origin of species and the diversity of, what we call, life on Earth. What natural selection certainly can do, and does, is adaptation, or selective breeding. But, natural selection has no foresight, and this leads to all sorts of problems for the lineage of entities under selection. By differential death and reproduction, natural selection amplifies or suppresses heritable variations and traits between members of the same species. Indeed, such change can happen very quickly, biologically speaking, observable over just a few generations, and this is indeed observable in the human species over the past decades. Much is correctly made of the Western leadership-imposed replacement immigration in the Western nations, but this is only a surface symptom of much deeper biological changes by which Western populations have voluntarily changed to massive subfertility. Thus all the native populations of all Western nations, indeed all the developed/wealthy/powerful nations, all over the world, are massively subfertile and en route to chosen self-extinction. It is only because of this profound motivational change within the West, that mass migration has successfully been imposed on the West, because the world population of human beings is still growing, fueled by rapidly increasing populations in the Third World and undeveloped countries, in, for instance, Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, the North Africa/Middle East, and South Asia. Such population growth has been made possible by the developments in the West, technological and economic but especially medical and public health developments that have reduced infant and child mortality rates from more than half of children dying before maturity to only 1 or 2%, something like a 50-fold increase in the proportion of children who survive to adulthood. In sum, 1. The West and developed world have chosen self-extinction by massive subfertility. 2. The Third World has been made superfertile by the West. 3. So across the human species overall, the population of the Third World is expanding, the West contracting. 4. And the Third World population will replace that of developed nations in terms of the makeup of human beings. This will happen with or without mass migration, which is something extra to the situation, presumably motivated by the motivation of strategic destructive evil that is endemic and, recently, dominant, within the Western establishment. This demographic transformation of the human species just as natural selection, in action, in real time, already happened, still happening. But natural selection is like an algorithm, it just increases the proportion of some gene variants and reduces others. Natural selection has no foresight, and no long-term aim. It is a fact, so far as is known, that a Third World population cannot, therefore will not, be able to sustain the technological, economic and medical advances that led to the massive expansion of Third World population to replace the West. So natural selection will lead to an unsustainable situation, an unsustainably large world population, which, because unsustainable, will lead to massive death, giga in scale, i.e. measurable in billions. And, at the root of it, are the reproductive motivations and choices of the mass of Western people, and the people of all developed nations. And at the root of reproductive motivations and choices is, ultimately, spiritual choices. And at the root of spiritual choices, at the very bottom line, I would say, lies metaphysical choices, the choice of what we each, and en masse, assume to be the nature of ultimate reality. Note added, I have previously written considerably about the business of fertility, and giga-death, because I have had an interest, initially as an academic, in the subject for some 20 years. But the events of the past 2 decades have convinced me that my earlier theoretical answer to this problem, which was a mass revival of traditional, and probably patriarchal, religion, will not work. The evidence that it will not work includes the collapse of Mormon fertility into below replacement levels, even among devout Mormons, and the failure of the Fire Nation to reach replacement levels despite by far the most significant national Christian revival in the developed world. This has led me to believe that the cause lies very deep, deeper than church religions, but that analysis does not point towards any solution to the looming problem towards which natural selection is propelling us, let alone a conceivably plausible socio-political answer. Bernard Shaw, the one-volume definitive biography by Michael Holroyd, 1997. Bruce Charlton. For a couple of weeks, several hours per day, I have been reading Michael Holroyd's 1997 single-volume condensation of his previously published 4-volume biography of Bernard Shaw. It took me a long time. Even greatly shortened, this was one of the biggest biographies I have read all through. Another reason for my slowness is that Shaw's life, or at least his adult life, was so complex, fascinating, and varied. Also, I, like most people, find Shaw's character extremely odd, inconsistent, in fact incoherent. He was sometimes the kindest, most considerate and helpful of people, genuinely saint-like in behavior, including keeping secret the vast scale of his gifts and assistance. He could be almost paralyzed with horror by the contemplation of cruelty and suffering, in reality or imagination. At other times, especially when wearing his persona of GBS, Shaw was himself, and advocated a calculated hard-hearted indifference to well-being and life that was a glorification of cruelty and unkindness. This can be explained by thinking of Shaw as an extreme version of the leftist, or liberal, ethic that regards suffering as the worst thing in life and therefore the elimination of suffering as the primary value, to the point that mass deployment of suicide and humane killing become imperative, and a moral necessity. In this sense, as in others, Shaw was in the vanguard, because this perspective is nowadays mainstream and officially endorsed, although very few are honest enough to state it explicitly. I have been reading Shaw since my early teens. Back then, I thought that, although he persistently pushed some silly and false notions, Shaw was right about most of the most important things, and I modeled some of my own main ideas and aspirations on his work, at least in some moods, and to some extent. Nowadays, by contrast, Shaw seems to be fundamentally wrong about most important things, as well as having multiple very annoying or self-indulgent attributes. Yet I continue to regard him as a great genius, and return to his works to relish their distinctive quality of expression, whose good and bad qualities were both very obvious, and therefore probably two sides of the same coin. My main criticism of Shaw, as of so many people, is that he never reflected on his fundamental, metaphysical, assumptions concerning the nature of reality. Therefore, he never really understood that the inadequacies and contradictions of his attitudes, opinions, and actions, originated and were sustained by the incoherence of his deepest assumptions, many of which I believe Shaw would have rejected, had he ever become aware of them. Party politics, bribery and blackmail. Bruce Charlton. Now it is evident that the party political system is a bribery and blackmail machine. It may be possible to understand the right-left divide more accurately. The left party consists of those controlled mainly by financial bribes and blackmail. The right party consists of those controlled mainly by sexual bribes and blackmail. Of course, this is only a generalization, and, after all, the right and left always drift leftwards, and often swap over. The mechanisms for financial corruption vary by time and place. Nowadays financial corruption is hidden in plain sight. Bribes comes from, for example, book advances, lectures and consultancy. Blackmail may simply be an audit. And the sexual basis for control have, in some instances, inverted. That which used to be blackmailable is now mandatorily supported. Such that anyone who opposes activities that used to lead to blackmail, can himself now be blackmailed. But my point is that perhaps we could consider political parties as being convenient ways by which those with real power deploy to group together those political puppets, figureheads, and rubber stamps who are to be controlled. By his metaphysical choices, modern man demands to be manipulated by rulers. Bruce Charlton. Everybody nowadays complains about the lies, bribes, coercions and other psychological manipulations of the leadership class. But modern man has made the metaphysical decision to regard reality as without purpose or meaning. So, if there is to be any human society of any kind, it can only operate at a psychological level. By his metaphysical choices, modern man demands to be manipulated by propaganda. In modern society, people do things for reasons that tear psychological merely temporary feels, because, by his metaphysical choices, there can be nothing else. In other words, if modern man says and acts as if there is no purpose or meaning to the human condition, then everything social reduces to a kind of manipulative behaviorism or conditioning, because it must be. Because, by assumption, it cannot be anything else. What else could life be when things are not going anywhere nor for any particular reason? Modern man wants and hopes that the socio-political manipulators, the leadership or ruling class, will be kindly, will want us to be cheerful and comfortable, rather than suffering miserably. In a world where there is nothing deeper than current feels, we desire to be ruled by effective manipulators that are dedicated to inducing us to experience pleasing and gratifying psychological states. And that is what we call good government. But there is no compelling reason why the manipulators would want us to be happy. After all, by our metaphysical assumptions, to them, we are just useless strangers, or numbers on a spreadsheet. Why should the manipulators want a mass of abstract people to be happy? Why should they manipulate our feels, so as to maximize our gratifications and minimize our sufferings? There seems no realistic psychological reason why they would. Given what modern man believes is the nature of reality, it is not surprising that instead the real-life manipulators more often want to exploit us for their own gain, whether for individual gratification, aka corruption, or for their collective gain, aka totalitarianism, because at least exploitation is psychologically comprehensible. Even worse, we are increasingly getting manipulators who are spitefully motivated, who happen to enjoy tormenting and killing us. And none of this ought to be surprising. Modern man has decided that life is about nothing more or deeper than current psychology, has made a system of socio-political control based upon that assumption, and is now reaping the inevitable consequences of that worldview. Note, we need to grasp the sheer absurdity of what most people are hoping for in their political aspirations, given their metaphysical assumptions concerning reality. While it is, of course, normal for the leadership class to affect a great concern for the happiness and well-being of the masses, for leaders to claim in words that they are motivated by altruism, it is a plain fact that mainstream modern materialistic atheism provides zero rational basis for such altruism. And yet people are astonished and disappointed, again and again, not learning from repeated experience, when leaders never fulfill their promises of working for our benefit. Media fasting is getting easier. Bruce Charlton. I have given up on so many blogs and vlogs and user groups lately. As everything fills up with adverts, and funding requests, and buy my merch requests. Including subscription streaming services, including YouTube, including videos, blogs, essays, Substack, and just about everything almost everywhere I turn. It's all variations on a signal saying, I'm not interested in communicating with you, so much as I am intent on extracting money from you. Well, it all makes it easier, indeed spontaneous, to do what I should be doing anyway, which is watching and reading much less of this stuff, or indeed none at all. Every little helps. Note, for obvious reasons, I also swiftly give up on those who recurrently feature, use or promote AI, or who insist on discussing AI outputs in a positively valued or hopeful way. It could be argued that this was always the case, more or less, and that is true. But nowadays, as the Christian West recedes ever further from living memory, the gloves have come off, people are more naked in their motivations, consequently their selfish motivations are less mixed with that spontaneous, largely unconscious, spiritual level communal concern, which constrained people in the past. Why are the totalitarian establishments spreading predictions of civil war, intra-national aggressive conflict? Bruce Charlton. Some very high-up members of the totalitarian establishment have recently been seeding the mainstream mass media with predictions and warnings of civil war, in the UK, especially. I will here term civil war as intra-national aggressive conflict, if you know what I am getting at. Clearly, intra-national aggressive conflict predictions coming from the establishment are not the consequence of truth-seeking analysis or altruistic concern, but are instead some kind of an incitement and manipulation. So, what's going on? My best guess is that this is part of the leadership struggle and civil war afoot within and among the establishment, that between servants of two kinds of evil agenda. The civil war between the bureaucratic totalitarians, who want a world of omni-surveillance and micro-control, and who reached the peak of their power globally, in early 2020, and the rising agents of chaos, who are motivated by a spiteful desire to induce suffering and destruction. I regard recent intra-national aggressive conflict predictions and warnings as a signal from the totalitarians to the agents of chaos, that the establishment is ready, willing and keen to crush the agents of chaos, and their minions, by coordinated force. In other words, that the soft totalitarianism of propaganda, bribery and demoralization, which has grown over the past half-century to dominate the West, is preparing, if necessary, to revert to old-style, hard, mid-20th century, coercive dictatorship. At least I think that is the intent. But materialist atheistic leftism cannot force their genie of hedonic despair back into its bottle. The actuality is that the 20th century dictatorship is no possible anymore, due to major changes in, especially Western, nations and their peoples, and the attempt to reintroduce it will instead play directly into the agenda of the agents of chaos. In other words, any approach towards intra-national aggressive conflict will fail to restore totalitarian order, but will instead do the opposite, by fueling the motivations of spiteful destructiveness on a widening scale. The totalitarian era is past, because of the nature of materialist atheist leftism, which has been undermining and degrading its basis for many decades, so that our societies are not just deeply dysfunctional in multiple domains, but also, at the level of individual people, as well as institutionally, have destroyed the basis for coordinated and long-termist action. Instead, the mood in the West is one of self-hatred and civilizational suicide, and the strongest motivations are immediate term, oppositional and negative, and this equally applies to whatever agencies, including military and police, law and administrative, by which it is indented that order be restored. Unfortunately, the masses, you and me, and those we care about, will as always be the primary victims of any intra-establishment civil war. Yet, after all, that was an implicit inevitability, after Western civilization chose to reject and deny all possibility of purpose and meaning in life, in order to pursue our dreams of short-term material and sexual gratifications without being trammeled by divine considerations. My take-home message is that we all ought to remember that the establishment, both sides, and its mainstream media are not providing honest information or wise guidance for our benefit, but are trying to manipulate our psychology for their own ends. Note added, the fracture lines interestingly revealed by the location of proposed violent conflict, intra-national or international. Thus, the totalitarians are playing with the idea of intra-national aggressive conflict, while the agents of chaos have been pushing to expand and escalate World War III on multiple fronts, especially since 2022. I guess that each side hopes that their favored conflict will act to prevent the other, i.e. that international conflict will be too urgent and demanding, to allow intranational aggressive conflict on one side, or that intranational conflict will weaken countries too much for them to engage in significant and long-term external combat. The spiritual failure of the boomers. William Wildblood. I was born in the mid-1950s, so I'm a boomer as these things are defined, but I would like to think I am not typical of my cohort. I certainly absorbed some of the boomer mentality while growing up in the 60s and 70s, but I consciously rejected a lot of the more overt liberal/leftist and anti-traditional stuff, though some of it will undoubtedly have rubbed off on me. But I understand why many people in the generations that followed despise the boomers for trashing Western civilization, an accusation which I regard as a fair one even if previous generations cannot be exonerated. Nothing comes out of nothing, and the boomer generation was merely the blossoming of a seed that had long been germinating. The boomers thought they could change the world, and they set about it, in their eyes as practical idealists. However, there were generous helpings of selfishness involved, and even narcissism. They were the first generation who were spoiled and cosseted in their youth, and did they ever take advantage of it? They had the material goods and developed a moral/spiritual superiority complex, but they completely misconceived the idea of love, reducing it to a pleasurable emotion and expunging it of any sense of sacrifice. Sacrifice is the essence of love, but the boomers turned love into indulgence. Boomer self-centeredness is one thing, but where this generation really failed is where they thought they were at their best. When I lived in India in the 1980s, the caste system was officially disowned, but in reality it was still operative. As a Westerner, I was supposed to condemn caste, but I understood the reasons for it, even if it had been abused in the practice, as any hierarchical system will be in a fallen world. Nonetheless, life is hierarchical, and if you destroy hierarchy, you simply reduce standards to a lowest common denominator. Tradition which knew this was wise. Modernity which denies it is ignorant. Ignorant, you might say, but well-meaning, to which the obvious answer would be that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But that aside, is it really well-meaning to have this attitude, or is it just weak, a symptom of that spiritually corrosive desire, the desire to be liked? I was warned by someone of the higher castes that I should not bring my liberal Western prejudices, and they are prejudices, to any relationships with Indians of the lower castes, because if I did they would just take advantage. In words which struck me then and stay with me now, he said, "Don't try to be kind. They will take your kindness for weakness." Now, this has to be unpacked a little. It doesn't mean, don't be kind. Kindness is good and right, obviously. What it means, and what the boomers have missed, is that often what you tell yourself is kindness is actually weakness, and, in the boomers' case, it is weakness supplemented by a misplaced sense of guilt to which they have succumbed, partly because of indoctrination but also because of their own spiritual failings, which include the lack of acknowledgement of the transcendent reality of God, or, if God is acknowledged, his demotion from all Father and Creator to impersonal universalized compassion. The self-perceived victim and underdog classes see this weakness and exploit it, and this is leading to the downfall of the West. Kindness is weakness when it ignores reality for the sake of being, or appearing to be, nice. In line with the general feminization of the West, it is largely a feminine failing, of both sexes. When counterbalanced by masculine authority, it can help mitigate any resultant severity, But when that authority has been as undermined as it has been, it is purely destructive of any higher order. It opens the door to attack from below and societal dismantling as the structures that have built that society and culture are torn down in the name of equality and fairness. Fairness to what? To those that want what others have, or to the truth? The boomers are like the decadent progeny of an aristocratic class that consumes what its ancestors have built up with no thought for its descendants. They will have a spiritual bill to pay. But this doesn't let subsequent generations off the hook. They may complain about boomer selfishness, but is that because they want what the boomers have, or are they prepared to suffer and sacrifice to put things right? Not that things can be put right. The momentum of dissolution is too far advanced for that to happen. This cycle is coming to a close. But the effort to turn the tide and redress past failures will pay spiritual dividends on an individual level, and maybe even mitigate what is traditionally known as the wrath of God, an outmoded but evocative term for the consequences of wrong thinking and wrong actions. The stomach and the true self. Francis Berger. In Beyond Good and Evil, Friedrich Nietzsche poignantly noted that the stomach is the reason man does not easily take himself for a god. The aphorism requires little interpretation. It surgically and succinctly reveals man's obvious natural and biological limitations in mortal life. The aphorism is often cited as an appeal to humility. Unlike the perfect, transcendent, unfeeling, eternal omnigod of Christian philosophers, man is deeply anchored in nature and at the mercy of basic biological functions and needs. Taken as a synecdoche, the belly represents all of man's glaring vulnerabilities and barriers, all those things that make us mortal, dependent, and limited. At the very least, it serves as a sobering reminder of the gaping void that separates man from God. The things that ground us in mortality, many of which are needed simply to survive in mortal life, are the same things that prevent us from becoming gods. Yet this contrast between the human and the divine can only go so far. After all, Jesus' offer of everlasting life offers a man a way out of mortal limitations. It essentially closes the gaping void separating man from God. Jesus' offer is meant to remind man that he possesses a true self, an innate part is divine, a part is a god in embryo. It is this part that moves on to everlasting life and heaven. During mortal life, the true self lies buried under layers of false selves. Some of these, exemplified by the stomach, are needed for basic survival in the mortal world. Others stem from genes and heredity. Others emerge from the process of socialization, psychological development, learning, and experience. Some false selves are indispensable to mortal life, others are actively taken on and endanger or corrupt mortal life. Beneath all of that lies the true self, an uncaused cause that is by itself an eternal center of freedom, agency, creativity, and being. It is the true self that ultimately accepts or rejects Jesus' offer of everlasting life, with the understanding that Jesus' second creation offers the true self, as a center of freedom, agency, creativity, love, and being, the opportunity to fully and creatively participate in creation sans any physical, natural, and mortal limitations. The true self is the reason why man should not easily mistake himself for being nothing more than a stomach. Writers who always, by their own account, have a great time. Bruce Charlton. There is a very great deal of untruthfulness in the world today. More than there was even as recently as 40 years ago, although, of course, there has always been a good deal of lying and even more misleading, even in the most honest places, which used to include England. In everyday social life there are some people who claim always to have had a great time, whatever they have been doing, at a play or concert, a party or holiday. By their own account, their lives are one fun thing after another. The valuation is not accurate, as you realize if you ever happen to observe them in such situations. Indeed, nobody who was not in the grip of chronic hypomania could possibly regard their own life in the way they claim to. Such people would be outraged if accused of lying, or even exaggerating, their own responses, yet, in their own way, each is systematically misleading other people about the nature of reality. We, as social listeners, need to realize that such people are not speaking accurately, and the same applies to writing. Social media has greatly increased the amount of having a great timers among writers, just as, on the opposite pole, there are many more high-volume pathographers. Indeed, the same person may alternate their accounts of themselves, oscillating between accounts of exaggerated happiness and misery. Although it is true that a false impression is being deliberately created, the audience are complicit, because the audience wants to believe that a life of continual fun is possible, and achievable by themselves. And this is the basis of the exploitation. The apparently hypomanic social media influencer is in some sense selling the method by which the audience expect to have as much as fun as the influencers appear to be having. And this claim hope forms the basis of whatever is for sale. But what applies, in a crude and rather obvious way, in the world of social media, also applies in the world of serious writing, of theology, philosophy, and spiritual writing generally. Some authors, and these include some of the best, as well as most of the worst, project a personal of having a great time, and describe their own exquisite responsivity to place and situation, to books and music, their intense and frequent religious experiences, their ecstasies and transcendental exaltations. And readers need to recognize that this is as false and misleading an artifact, as contrived a construct, as the overacted excitements of social media influencers. I did not recognize this as an adolescent, but, to an amazing extent, took authors at their own evaluation and projection. It was a valid learning process to realize, e.g. from further experience, critical analysis, or biographies, that literally nobody I have ever known of, IRL or by writings, has solved the problem of living in the way that so many such imply that they have. This insight has been vital in realizing that there is no solution to the problem of living in this mortal life and earth, and that attempts to emulate constructed authorial personae do more harm than good. It's a kind of laziness, to which I am also prone, to try and pick up a purpose and meaning of one's own life in any second-hand, or emulating, kind of way. Certainly we can learn from other people, but we'd be wise to learn from what is true, rather the fantasies they try to convince us are true. This involves acknowledging that almost everybody with whom we interact is not just habitually and by social conviction dishonest, but is making no serious or sustained attempt to be honest. Especially not about their own motivations and responses. If we can sustain this realism, we might then be able to learn the right lessons, and make the right choices, relevant for our unique actual life and situation. Some other writers adopt a chronic and pervasive pessimism and/or affectation of misery, which, if sincere and chronic, would have long since led them to obscurity and death, rather than the fame and esteem they bask in. Schopenhauer and Samuel Beckett spring to mind. This negative propaganda has only ever been popular among a subsector of upper class, or would-be upper class, intellectuals. But that's another story. AI in education equals not even trying to try. Francis Berger. Tertiary education has been nosediving for at least a century. By the looks of things, AI will be the ground into which that century-long tailspin in quality and everything else will finally crash and explode into a fiery ball, leaving nothing but a smudge of charred earth behind. My personal experience in attempting to teach anything in this age of AI tells me that most students have sunk far below not even trying and are now descending into the murky depths of not even trying to try. And what are our hallowed citadels of darkness doing to counter this egregious yet strangely self-entitled lack of effort and thinking in university education? Well, they are forcing professors and instructors to attend workshops and conferences on how educators must harness the power and potential of AI in the lecture hall and classroom, thereby validating and implementing not even trying to try as the new standard of academic excellence. As with most things in the past 100 years or so, this is sure to end well, assuming it has not already ended. Note added, for the sake of clarity, I should add that most profs and instructors do not oppose harnessing the power and potential of AI in the lecture hall or classroom. With AI, the whole paradigm is false and needs to be rejected. Bruce Charlton.
One thing about AI is that whenever someone points out a drawback, people will try to frame the opposition as opposition to just that specific thing. The salesman will try to present things as if, of course everyone agrees that AI is good and inevitable, but they just have doubts about the implementation. But no, it goes beyond that. The whole paradigm is false. That replacing people and thinking is good, that it is an advance, that it is inevitable, that the people selling it actually know what will happen in the future, that we should organize our lives based on their projections. The whole thing. Likewise with social media. The whole paradigm that virtual interaction can equal or replace real interaction is what is wrong. Not some quibble with the implementation, but the whole thing. And along with the whole thing, the fact that the people promoting it are trustworthy or know anything. Yes, there is a great deal of money and propaganda behind both of those things, as well as, unfortunately, widespread adoption. But if the paradigm that these things are good and inevitable is wrong, if the whole philosophy is false, then things will not work the way people say they will. The future will not unfold the way they say it will, and people are mistaken to build their lives around such predictions.
Commenter NLR at Francis Berger's blog. The above paragraph seems to encapsulate much of what I believe about A.I', its nature and intent, and why I have blogged so often on the subject. Francis Berger then continues. Quote, unfortunately, people seem unable or unwilling to reject whole paradigms, even when they detect the falsehood within them. There are probably many reasons for this, none of them good. I suspect most are just stuck in some kind of go with the flow mode of existence and will go wherever the wind takes them. Others appear to be aiming at some sort of expediency or chance at gain. People don't seem all that interested in thinking anymore. Thinking is simply not valued. Nor do they seem all that interested in forming real relationships with real people, and even when they do, there tends to be an aura of unreality or virtuality in it, as if the person before them is but an avatar. End quote. Francis Berger's comment also encapsulates something I feel strongly: the lack of interest in thinking. The way I understand this is that people are utterly fatalistic and negative about their ability to resist or influence the system, as it impinges upon them. And their inner reasoning goes something like, because, they assume, I can do nothing to stop anything bad, therefore there is no point in me thinking about it. Thinking about that sort of thing will just make me miserable, it can do nothing else, therefore it is better not to think. Best just to focus on the happy stuff and make the best of the inevitable. This is the end stage of the mainstream official materialism of our fundamental civilizational assumptions. Thinking is just regarded as a free spinning cog inside our brains, unless it eventuates in observable change. Our personal discernments and evaluations, our inner sense of truth and values, are regarded as simply irrelevant, because they are assumed to make zero difference to anybody or anything else. many people are currently approaching a ground zero of human spirituality. For vast numbers, all possibility of religion has already been abolished by their own assumptions. By implicitly accepting the AI paradigm, and by refusing to think, people are voluntarily and actively destroying their livelihoods, their lives, and themselves. Note added, it strikes me that all the top-down totalitarian imposed litmus tests share this attribute of requiring whole paradigm rejection. For instance, the 2020 birdemic was an entire paradigm of untruthfulness, from the unwarranted assumptions that there was a pandemic, through its identity, and the false measures taken in response, right down to the incoherent nonsense of testing, and disease status. Therefore, at the time, the birdemic could not effectively be opposed by critique and resistance of any specific aspects, at any specific level. It was framed as accept all, or reject the package. We ought to be honest and explicit about what we regard as impossible. Bruce Charlton. One of the problems about discussing the supernatural or paranormal with a typical mainstream modern materialist atheist, is that he regards all such things as a created reality, gods/gods, spirits, life after death, miracles, ghosts, UFOs and aliens, out-of-body experiences, precognition, telekinesis, and telepathy. As not just improbable but impossible. He thinks that such phenomena are not real, simply do not exist. Therefore he is immune to evidence, and can never be convinced by any account of them, because since he has decided that such phenomena do not exist, all such evidence must be mistaken or dishonest. All reports of phenomena can only be explained by being explained away with normal materialist causes, or else ignored because they must be mistaken or dishonest. But while it is easy to criticize materialist atheists for such exclusions, we all use this method of reasoning. For instance, I will always interpret claims of precognition, of being able to see the future, in ways that preserve the irreversible and sequential nature of time. I simply cannot be persuaded that somebody already knows the future in that sense, because for me time is an intrinsically part of my most fundamental assumptions concerning reality. That is, because I regard eternal living beings as the fundamental units of reality. The livingness of beings is dynamic and developmental, such that what we abstractly call time is an attribute of all beings. Therefore I will not accept any explanation of phenomena that regards all time as simultaneous, or posits a situation outside of time, or includes time travel into the future. I am not persuadable otherwise, and I ought to make this clear before engaging in evaluations of phenomena that appear to, or are presented as if they, challenge the directionality in sequence and pervasiveness of time. I am, on this theme, immune to evidence. It would be a good thing if everybody did this, if everybody who excluded all supernatural or paranormal phenomena was explicit about their immunity to contrary evidence. Because, in a sense, such a declaration can be the beginning of wisdom about one's own most fundamental, metaphysical, assumptions, and that they are indeed assumptions. I am happy to endorse my own assumptions about time, but when I realized, in 2008, that I was believed that God could never provide revelations to men, and the reason for this belief was that I had pre-excluded the existence of God. Then I realized this was an assumption, not an inference, and as such was immune to all possible evidence about the reality of revelations. Having realized that my views about the divine were rooted in assumptions, and were not the consequence of evidence, I then, after further thinking, realized I did not believe those assumptions were true, and I later abandoned those assumptions, and began to believe in God. If we are clear and explicit about our assumptions and that they are assumptions, this can be the beginning of wisdom, of many kinds. But until we get this clear, we shall remain slaves to whatever assumptions we happen to have absorbed, from whatever source, and for whatever reason. Transhumanism, a cure for entropy. No, transhumanism is a faith-based ideology. Bruce Charlton. Like most men through history, I regard entropy as the fundamental problem of this mortal life on earth, in other words, what the fourth gospel called death or sin. Entropy is the tendency of all entities to undergo change, degeneration, and dissolution, loss of form, for men to suffer disease and death. Entropy is the fundamental problem of mortal life, because it cannot be prevented, or, at least, it never yet has been prevented. But transhumanism claims that entropy can be cured, by human effort, and the application of science and technology. And transhumanism is, mostly implicitly, and for lack of any acceptable alternative, perhaps the dominant ideal, and ideology of the developed world today. The main basis of this claim to be able, in principle, to cure entropy, is that disease and degeneration has been delayed in many places, and the average age of death has been delayed considerably. In other words, some of the symptoms of entropy have been, in some cases, quantitatively alleviated by extension of technologies of exactly the kind we already have, drugs, surgery, genetic manipulations and so forth. On the other hand, the waning of one disease means the waxing of another. For example, as a smaller proportion of otherwise healthy old people died of pneumonia in their 60s, a much greater proportion of decrepit older people died with dementia in their 80s. While average human lifespan has indeed greatly increased globally, and especially in developed nations, maximum human lifespan seems to be the same as ever, or hardly changed. And while people in their 50s and 60s look and behave younger than those of that age did 100 years ago, if they live long enough the signs of extreme old age will come upon them, and with greater rapidity, somewhat as Aldous Huxley described in his Brave New World. So, transhumanism is not based on any fundamental insight or empirical discovery, rather it should be considered an ideology, i.e. a religion minus the divine, that is intended to, and sometimes does, replace religions, especially Christianity. In the fourth gospel, the work of Jesus Christ is rooted in his offering an eternal and complete cure for entropy, which is called death or sin, but on the other side of death and by resurrection. Transhumanism offers its cures for entropy on this side of death, and without the remaking of self that is resurrection, which is probably the basis of the appeal of transhumanism. The promise of transhumanism is one of alleviation of suffering and abolition of death soon, and without having to die first. If this was possible, and true, then the appeal of transhumanism is obvious to anyone who desires above all to escape from disease, degeneration, and death. However, at root the transhumanist proposed cure of entropy is purely imaginary, a nice notion, a wave of the hand, an unfounded assertion. If entropy is real, then it cannot be cured by any possible technology, because all technologies are subject to entropy, and so on, all the way down. And if entropy is not real, well, that would be something that transhumanists would need to argue explicitly. Yet transhumanism passes itself off, with its quantitative analogies, as hard science or more like applied technology, a thing attainable with bureaucratic reliability, by a sufficiently large and well-funded project management of research effort, by directed human effort. With transhumanism we have, as so often, unacknowledged metaphysics as the basis of an assumed ideology, an ideology that pretends to be a consequence and inference of solid and inescapable empirical facts. Thus people are choosing to be transhumanist purely on the basis of wanting to escape the effects of entropy, and then assuming that it is possible to abolish entropy in this mortal life and world. The assumption that entropy can be cured is the basis of all that follows in transhumanism, and, as an assumption, it cannot be disproved. It is a matter of faith. What I ask is that such an assumption be regarded as an assumption. The assumption should be made clear and explicit and upfront, rather than hidden away, implicit, or falsely denied to be an assumption. And consequently the ignorant or dishonest pretense should be dropped that transhumanism is a rational extension of further developing science, medicine, or technological breakthroughs. It is no such thing. Transhumanism just is a faith-based ideology, and should be acknowledged, evaluated and judged as such. The extreme difficulty of winning a war against opponents who are forbidden to surrender, and therefore must be annihilated. Bruce Charlton. What follows is meant to provide an historical analogy for a current real-world situation, i.e. the Western proxy war against the Fire Nation. The Paraguayan War of 1894 was apparently one of the most destructive wars in history, in terms of the proportion of the Paraguayan population killed. Broadly speaking, because precise numbers are not known, more than half of the entire nation of Paraguay were killed, including nearly all men. This happened because Paraguay was a small and relatively weak nation whose, apparently crazed or psychopathic, leader Lopez attacked three much larger and stronger surrounding nations, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, simultaneously. Despite this one-sidedness, the war continued for more than 5 years because Paraguay was not allowed to surrender. It takes much longer to annihilate a population than to defeat a nation militarily. When a nation is being used as a proxy by a superpower, an easy matter to do by imposing a superpower puppet leadership, by coup, and controlling them by bribery and blackmail, the proxy nation is in a similar situation to, but potentially worse than, Paraguay. The proxy nation may be militarily defeated, but forbidden to surrender. Then the war can only end by annihilation of the proxy nation. And conducting a war to the point of annihilation of the enemy, is bound to be far more costly and destructive even to the victorious side, than would be the case of fighting only to the point of military defeating the opponent. Hence the appeal to superpowers of using proxies to fight their opponents, rather than doing so oneself. Suppose then that the superpower has several further proxies lined up and waiting in the wings, and who will be compelled to fight until each of these is also annihilated. And suppose further that the superpower actively despised, resented, or otherwise hated the proxy nations. This is why being a proxy nation used by a superpower may be worse than Paraguay. I presume that the Paraguayan leader did not actually hate his people, and did not desire that they be annihilated, but those controlling a superpower may actively hate the people of the nation they are using as proxy. The superpower may be glad that the people fighting as their proxy, are being slaughtered en masse and their country ruined. In this case, the annihilation of a series proxy nations used in wars against the Fire Nation would actually be a positively desired result. Finally, we should add that a supranational globalist leadership class is actually controlling the geopolitical strategy of the West. This is a group without any national or other group loyalties, but instead motivated by a destructive hatred of all nations and peoples. A group, I would add, whose members are mostly in service to demonic powers, rather than pursuing human interests. Therefore, it is desirable for such a group that this planned sequence of proxy wars should also damage the superpower who is proximately contriving and conducting them. What I am talking about is therefore a blueprint for incremental worldwide annihilation by mutual destruction. Because, once lethal conflict has begun, then, so long as those in power remain in power, nobody will be allowed to stop and there will be no victory. This business of contriving an unending sequence of unwinnable proxy wars designed for mutual destruction is, I believe, the actual situation in the world today. I assume that this fact is understood by at least some participants at the highest levels of geopolitical strategy, but most people in most places simply will not accept that the things could possibly be as bad as I describe. Time will tell. God, the World and the Soul. William Wildblood. The three realities of human existence are God, the world and the soul, which is to say the inner subject, the outer object, and that from which both of these derive. These can be seen as 3 points of a triangle with God at the apex. The tragedy of modern man is that the apex point is either denied or, if accepted, seen in the light of some part of the baseline. In fact, this point is the only thing that can give meaning and reality to the other 2 points. Without not just acknowledging God but seeing Him as the root of the other two, these two, man and the world, amount to nothing but confusion and chaos, hence the nihilistic state in which we live, even if we cover that up with all kinds of distractions. Man can only know himself through interaction with the world of objective existence. In his early stages he remains embedded in nature and does not know himself as a free agent. He is still in the arms of the mother, subject to her moods and seasons. It is the great achievement of Western man that he broke free of nature and began to master it. The initial phases of this are recorded in myth as the hero fights various monsters, many of these symbolic of the devouring mother that would drag him back down to the preconscious state of non-individuality. The rupture with nature brought freedom but also separation and loss. What humanity has achieved is extraordinary, but it comes at a cost. When Odin, who can be said to represent Western man, memorably in his guise as Wotan as depicted in Wagner's Ring Cycle, sacrifices his eye in return for wisdom, this signifies the closing down of clairvoyant faculties as the intellectual mind starts to awaken and the free individual asserts himself in subjective consciousness. This is a necessary and vital stage in the evolution of the soul, and it was achieved by Western man more than any other grouping of human beings. However, although it is an evolutionary advance, it leads to eventual calamity, the Gotterdammerung suffered by Wotan and the gods, as individuality goes too far and mastery of nature leads to destruction. Man has conquered the world but lost himself in the process. We are at that twilight of the gods stage now, and all the remedies proposed are useless because they come from within the system. Remaining where we are is alienation and death, but restoring past religion is no good either, because it was religion for the herd, not the full individuals we have become. A return to nature is not feasible for the self-conscious beings we now are, and if we try that it will be fake, performative. We cannot go back to the mother and the embryonic bliss of unself-consciousness. We cannot go back, we cannot stay where we are, we must go through and on. The only solution is to reach for transcendence, which means to acknowledge God, but this acknowledgement needs to be twofold. We must see God as the transcendent creator, but also as the ground of our own being, and we must align our individual self with that ground. In this way, we eventually become gods ourselves. Not in the way promised by the serpent, which offered the temptation of the perfectibility of the separate self, but in and through Christ, who raises the self-sacrificed in his name up to his own divine state. The world as we know it is coming to an end. The soul can follow the world, or it can follow God. It can identify itself with the world and take the path the world is taking, or it can start to identify itself with God and so move out of this world into divine being. This is the choice of our time. Review of Strange, Paranormal Realities in the Everyday World, 2025, by Andy Thomas. Bruce Charlton. When it comes to the paranormal, as with science, medicine and everything else important, I regard the source of purported information, of reported observations, to be vitally significant. In practice, This means that I only take seriously, which does not mean believe, information from those few people who I have reason to believe are capable and motivated to provide the best information they can. Andy Thomas is one of these people, being something of a pen friend, and someone whose lecture presentations I have watched on video, and some of whose books I have read. I have formed the judgment that he is an honest and well-informed chap, who is usually worth listening to. I have read quite a few books on paranormal stuff over the years, especially those by Colin Wilson, also much more widely. But a problem with Colin Wilson is that his sources on paranormal/occult matters are mostly, more or less, well-known people, mostly writers, and I tend to regard their reports as having a literary and contrived flavor. What Andy has done here is something that not many could do, because of his experience. For several decades he has traveled around Britain giving lectures on many subjects to all sorts of audiences, often in intimate venues. As an author and conference organizer, he is also very well connected in the more professional world of the paranormal. So it would be plausible to suppose that Andy Thomas is probably in the best possible position to provide a representative overview of paranormal matters in Britain today. In particular, Andy has personally met and spoken with probably thousands of people, of many kinds, including many ordinary people, by which I mean, not people who make a living or work professionally with paranormal matters, nor professional communicators such as journalists or authors. And he has talked with these people on many paranormal themes. Of course, Andy's contacts are not a random sample of the UK, which would be impossible since many people would not go to lectures of any kind, nor would they speak of paranormal matters to any stranger, but it's probably as good a cross-section of the nation as is viable. So, what makes Strange unique, is that it is a book about paranormal matters that consists substantially of the results of these many person-to-person meetings and communications with ordinary people, people who have approached Andy in various ways to tell him of something strange that happened to me. Apparently, he says, this happens a lot. After every talk mentioning paranormal matters he gives, there are those who speak from the audience and others who stay behind to share some experience, as if the subject matter of the lecture has jogged a memory, and given permission to speak or write. So one basic thesis of this book is that strange is normal, or relatively so. In other words, a high proportion of ordinary modern people have had some kind of experience that they regard as paranormal. What does Andy Thomas mean by paranormal? He describes some of the commonest themes, in approximate order of frequency. 1. Ghosts and poltergeists. 2. UFOs. 3. Out-of-body and near-death experiences. 4. Psychic phenomena, such as telepathy. 5. Premonitions. 6. Synchronicities. 7. Crop circle events. 8. Prehistoric site events, stone circles, etc. 9. Sighting of cryptids or anomalous creatures. Reports arranged in a similar thematic way form the structure of the book, interspersed with reflections, analysis, and summaries from the author. Thomas's assumption throughout is that paranormal phenomena are real, but on the question of what they actually are, how they're caused, and what they mean he is usually agnostic, presenting various theories but mostly without choosing between them. He does not rule out religious or simple spiritual explanations, and mentions them, but generally he seems to exhibit a preference for materialist/scientific explanations. For example, he several times mentions quantum entanglement as a putative cause of instant interaction over a distance. I mention this because I regard T as an example of a practice I have commented on before, by which writers on difficult to understand strange phenomena explain them by means of some idea, usually derived from physics, which is itself nigh impossible to understand. Colin Wilson's Faculty X, or Rupert Sheldrake's Morphic Fields and Resonances, are other examples. My own preference is instead imaginatively to try look at such things in the simplest and most instinctive way possible, that which would probably occur to a young child or tribal person. In other words, I favor an explanation that is usually animistic/anthropomorphic, and relates to the relationships between living beings. From such a perspective, there simply is not a problem in explaining many paranormal phenomena, since they are naturally and spontaneously taken for granted. Most of these problems arise from the recent models of modern science and materialism, and modern cultural ideas of what is supposedly impossible. So that, for instance, from an animistic perspective, ghosts, communications with the dead, telepathy, psychometry, out-of-body experiences and the like, all become something expected and normal. They need no further explanation, although they may benefit from further clarification. Having appreciated the range of reports in Strange, and accepting that the subject is real and worth investigation and consideration, the question arises as to the implications. What does it mean? How should we react to such a range of paranormal accounts? The way I would proceed is the same as I did when I was active in theoretical science, which was carefully to distinguish the provenance, i.e. the sources and lineage, of proposed information, with the aim of including only those sources who were evaluated to be honest and competent. This means, in practice, ignoring most sources, most people, because most reports from most people cannot positively be established to be both honest and competent. Thus I would take seriously Andy's own reports, but most of the other reports I would not include in my analyses, because I simply don't know whether I personally would regard Andy's secondary sources as valid. Then, even after excluding most, in usual practice almost all, of the putative information, I would need to distinguish between, on the one hand, the appearances of what that person had experienced, for example what they had seen, which may be generalizable. And, on the other hand, the theoretical explanations of these experiences, the identity and behaviors of what they had seen, which may well distort what has been perceived. This isn't easy to achieve, and there is no standard method for doing it. It is a matter of judgment. Nonetheless, such discernment needs to be done in order to cope with the many contradictions between accounts, even among accounts by those who are competent and honest. And finally, or rather before this process has even begun, we need to sort out our own ultimate metaphysical assumptions concerning the basic nature of reality. This means that it is not really possible to be agnostic on this or any other matter, since every person actually and inevitably interprets reality from some perspective that is ultimately rooted, not in evidence, but in assumptions. And if we don't already know our own primary assumptions concerning reality, these will need to be discovered, made explicit, and evaluated. Such are my reflections provoked by reading Andy Thomas's Strange. Note, an interesting example of the way that our assumptions affect our understanding of perceptions related to the mythical scarecrow shells of World War II. RAF aircrew had been officially informed that the Germans had developed demoralizing anti-aircraft shells that exploded to simulate the destruction of a British bomber. Such shells did not exist. The actual cause of such explosions was probably RAF bombers destroyed by Luftwaffe night fighters approaching from below with upward-firing cannon. But many expert and competent aircrew were absolutely sure that they had observed scarecrow shells. Freedom cannot be ontologically violated. Francis Berger. Traditional Christian proofs of God's existence, be they ontological, cosmological, or teleological, do nothing for me. At best, I find them unnecessary, at worst, I think they are misguided, perhaps even harmful. I will grant that such proofs may have served some positive purpose in the past when men chose a different mode of consciousness, but these positive purposes have since become insolvent. My biggest issue with traditional proofs for God's existence boils down to the assertion of divine sovereignty they contain, that God has absolute authority and total control over all of creation because, after all is said and done, He is the ultimate source of all creation. Within the framework of such assumptions, the freedom God grants human beings, and other beings in creation, is ontologically unfree. Suppose God is the source of freedom and controls all of creation. In that case, the freedom He grants human beings and others is deterministic. Now, philosophers and theologians have bent and continue to bend over backwards, formulating a wide array of abstract word spells to explain how the freedom a divine sovereign God grants us is genuinely free rather than deterministic, but such philosophical wranglings and assertions have never led to any satisfying breakthroughs concerning the true nature of freedom. On the contrary, they tend to come off as obscurant rather than revelatory. With that in mind, I must note that instigating prolonged and entirely useless theological/philosophical comment debates is not the chief aim of this post. If you assume God is the ultimate, absolute divine sovereign of everything and can somehow square this with authentic freedom, then knock yourself out. As for me, I firmly believe that freedom is only authentically free if it is, always has been, and always will be something that God cannot ontologically violate. And by cannot I mean precisely that. God cannot infringe upon freedom because He is not its source. Freedom lies beyond the power of God's divine sovereignty, and it is in this that the true purposes of creation can be contemplated and approached. Note, freedom here does not refer to the conventional Christian doctrine/concept of free will. God could not have made free creatures unless they were able to choose evil. Likewise for arguments that claim God cannot violate freedom or free will because He cannot violate His own omnipotence. Such assumptions still assert God to be the ultimate source of freedom, which is something I reject. Spiritual history, the compulsion and demand, and the impossibility, here and now. Bruce Charlton. There is an activity that might be termed spiritual history, by which I mean a purported history that derives from within a particular spirituality. And this spiritual history will typically become regarded as objectively true by adherents of the spirituality, true for everybody, not just for the adherents. So, what is a spiritual history? As one example, Helena Blavatsky described a vast, detailed, and complicated panorama of supposed world history, which became integral to the Theosophical Society she founded. This includes descriptions of creation from its earliest stages, many historical races of proto-humans, the earliest very unlike modern humans, and lost civilizations such as Lemuria, and Atlantis. Indeed, it is mostly because of Blavatsky that so many people have heard of, and been discussing, Atlantis over the past century plus. Blavatsky's spiritual history was very influential on the emerging occult societies of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, was expanded and reshaped, and extended millennia into the future, by Rudolf Steiner into his anthroposophy, and has since become a part of the vast and diffuse New Age movement of the past several decades. My point is that in the past a spiritual society, or a religion, would nearly always tend to elaborate, or as it is presented discover, a vast, detailed, and complex historical picture, which then forms a kind of metaphysical backdrop to the everyday practices and beliefs. We can see something similar among the best documented of the recent world religions, Mormonism, particularly stark in that the Book of Mormon came before the beliefs and practices that distinguished Mormonism from mainstream Christianity had been elucidated and fixed. An analogous process of elaborating a spiritual history apparently applies to mainstream Christianity, in that the process of elaborating a justifying and explaining vast/detailed/complex historical backdrop was apparently separate from, but in this case later than, the foundational teachings. In other words, the Gospels, especially the fourth, and earliest, Gospel, depict a very different, far briefer/less detailed/much simpler religion from the colossal artifact that Christianity became over the following centuries, which means that mainstream Christianity also discovered/developed a spiritual history. So far as I know, something similar applies to all religions, not to the same extent, but to a significant degree. This suggests that, at least in the past, and especially until about a century ago, a detailed spiritual history was probably both necessary to the establishment and sustaining of a successful church, and was demanded by the members of a church, for example to answer their natural questions regarding their religion's origins, purpose, and validity. But that was then, this is now, and spiritual histories, especially the historical factuality of the Bible, have been undergoing systemic challenge, subversion, and destruction from mainstream secular scholarship, for at least 200 years. And this continual challenge has its effect whatever the conclusion, because the process implicitly regards the religion as disprovable by the same secular mechanisms as other knowledge claims. Most of the most effective attacks on religion are implicit, and these are pervasive and unavoidable. Because the entirety of the systems of modern society are based upon secular, God-excluding, assumptions. This includes religions, which survive only by compliance with multiple laws and regulations of a secular type, to do with personnel and employment, human rights, hate speech, buildings, taxes and exemptions and subsidies. Many such. The process of evaluation of spiritual history accepts the definitive nature of secular scholarship, so that religion always and necessarily loses. Religion has preconceded defeat, by assumption. Yet the fundamentalist approach of asserting the validity of spiritual history does not work, either. It just puts the history into a sealed capsule where spiritual history cannot, therefore does not, have anything to do with the mainstream secular world of history. Consequently, even the most fundamentalist church Christians are just as subservient to the processes and procedures of totalitarian secular society as everybody else, believing and supporting nearly all of the main strategies of totalitarian evil, except for a symbolic handful of dissenting denials that adherents merely say, and a handful of self-reassuring dissenting activities that are, currently, tolerated by the system. In other words, spiritual history has, in the modern era, come to represent an unprotectable Achilles heel for all religions, and the bigger, more detailed, and more complicated the history, the more points that will be attacked, both explicitly and, even more powerfully, implicitly. Consequently, spiritual history no longer convinces many people, and those who remain convinced are not substantively affected by their encapsulated dissent, because they live in a society with which these historical assertions are incompatible. My conclusion is that spiritual history needs to be abandoned as a requirement of a spiritually viable, and sufficiently motivating religion. I feel that we simply cannot afford to open ourselves to the process of refutations, in a situation where we cannot ourselves deny the validity of that process. Or, to put it differently, our belief in alternative histories must be made independent of the processes of historical validation. And this includes beliefs concerning the foundation of our church or the origins of our scripture, because these are just as vulnerable to secular assumptions and processes as are the factual content of the spiritual histories. I mean that we cannot argue the validity of our church on the basis of history, because that historical evidence is itself vulnerable. And we cannot argue the validity of the Bible, for the same reason. My conclusion is that we need to rely for our deepest and most motivating convictions, only upon evidence that is derived personally and by criteria that satisfy ourselves primarily, and for which only self-validation is necessary. I mean, in other words, direct knowing, which might also be called a kind of intuition, needs to be our bottom line. This also means that, by eschewing external evidences, we cannot convince other people that we are right. But we can't do that anyway. So we are not being asked to give up very much. I am not saying that the Book of Mormon is entirely or even mostly fictitious. In my opinion, it does seem to include a good measure of objective fact and other phenomena that suggest that at least some of it was divinely inspired and true, rather than made up. Nonetheless, it is a valid example of spiritual history because of the Book of Mormon's provenance and role in Mormonism. As with the Book of Mormon, I am not suggesting that there is zero objective fact in the post-ascension spiritual history of Christianity, but that its development is separable from the beliefs and practices of core Christianity. We can continue to derive benefit from spiritual history, as, for instance, I do from the Christmas story. But, for this to be safe and personally effective, we must regard the truth and reality of spiritual history to be a qualitatively different and more personally validated thing than that of secular history. And this in turn is something we will need to sort out for, and from, ourselves. As a favorite example, I regard The Lord of the Rings as a true and real history of the world and men, but not as an objective or evidenced history. What is the IQ of AI? Answer: none at all. Bruce Charlton. I don't go looking for trouble, so I had not realized until now that people are confidently saying that such and such an AI has some particular level of IQ, apparently as measured by the program's performance in some or another intelligence test. From this is inferred that such and such an AI has a measured intelligence in, say, the top 10%, or 5%, or 0.01% of the UK population, or whatever. From which it is stated as a solid objective fact that AI is already at genius level IQ and will soon surpass all human capability. After which comes various pseudo-concerned hand-wringings of the plight of human beings in this world where AI has intellectual mastery, or else a techno-triumphalism asserting that humans must now make way for the rule of machines, etc. But this is utter nonsense. That it is nonsense really ought to be obvious. If people can't realize this, then I'm afraid they are putty in the hands of those who strategize to destroy us. Worse, they are complicit in their own proximate degradation and ultimate damnation. I feel embarrassed at having to explain, and it is seldom possible to explain the really obvious, but here goes. AI has no IQ, because it has no intelligence. None at all. Computers don't have intelligence. It is reasonable, and has been done, to measure using IQ tests, specially devised, the comparative intelligence of chimpanzees, or dogs, or other animals, because animals are living beings, and beings have intelligence. But not computers, because computers don't have intelligence. Intelligence, i.e. general intelligence or G, is an inferred underlying attribute behind all cognitive abilities, and IQ tests infer this from one or a range of cognitive tests used to put people into a rank order, to which the IQ number is applied on the basis of an assumed normal distribution. The test is not the intelligence, it is just a way of ranking the intelligence among beings with intelligence. The IQ test score does not mean anything at all, of itself. After all, if a person had been provided with a cheat sheet containing all the answers to an IQ test, then the test would not be measuring intelligence, would it? Correct answers are not the ability, are they? An AI doing an IQ test is just an elaborate cheat sheet. Computerized cheating to provide the right answers to a cognitive test is not intelligence. The validity of an IQ test as a measure of intelligence depends on the fact that the person, or other being, doing the test is actually working it out, by using their intelligence-correlated cognitive abilities. Computer mechanisms for answering IQ test papers have nothing to do with intelligence. Computers don't think, they are nothing but cheat sheets when it comes to intelligence testing. The only intelligence involved in AI cheats on IQ testing is that of humans, who are needed to provide the computer with the right answers, and programmers who engineer the algorithms for matching the right answers to the test questions. I mean that when people are claiming that current AI has very high, or above possible, intelligence, this is a stark reductio ad absurdum, at least for someone capable of understanding the world spontaneously from themselves and directly known, rather than through distorting lenses supplied by the totalitarian establishment. Shaul Behr's proposed solution to the paradox of free will and omniscience. William James Tychonievich.
Two roads diverged in a yellow wood. And sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood. Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken.
As you might expect from its title, Shaul Behr's novel Ari Barak and the Free Will Paradox not only tells a sci-fi story but also proposes a solution to one of the paradoxes associated with free will. Although this solution is proposed by fictional characters in the novel, I have to assume that it reflects the author's own views, since it seems unlikely that a sincerely religious man would include in an explicitly religious novel what he himself sees as a fake solution to a very real theological quandary. I will send Rabbi Behr a link to this post after I publish it so that he himself can weigh in if I have misjudged him. Rabbi Behr's proposal. The character Rabbi White, through his technology which artificially induces near-death-like experiences in the living, has twice been witness to the judgment of the heavenly court, which he describes as follows.
The soul is laid bare before the court, with all its achievements and shortcomings. And one of the ways the court judges you is by showing you a vision of what you could have been, had you made all the right decisions. I subsequently asked myself, how do they know? Where does this perfect you come from? I thus formulated a hypothesis that the paths not chosen are actually consequential. They do continue to exist even after a person has moved past them, and the alternative outcomes down these channels, among other things, form the basis of how a person is judged.
As the discussion continues, it is proposed that every time a person makes a free will choice, which, like Gurdjieff, Rabbi Behr sees as happening only occasionally and for some people essentially never, God creates parallel universes in which each of the possible choices is realized. When the rabbi's student Ari asks, how can a soul go on more than one path? His classmate Howard answers,
I've got it, it's not the same soul. At every decision point, the soul goes down both paths simultaneously. It doesn't realize it, but it has cloned itself, with one copy going down the right path, and one down the wrong one. And each copy of the soul experiences the path that it has chosen, which either elevates it, or degrades it. And then, at the end of the line, that version of the soul is judged according to the path it followed.
Ari replies,
So let me get this straight. I come to a decision point. I decide I'm going to take the good path. So my soul then goes into that path of the maze, and I experience the world as it unfolds because of my good decision. But, at the same time, a different version, like a clone of my soul, chooses the wrong way. And it goes into a world that's almost the same as the world I'm in, and it experiences a different version of reality. And just like two paths are still close to each other just after they diverge, the two realities look similar, but after they play out some more, they'll become very different. Have I got that right? But then, if this is true, then this solves the classic paradox. God's omniscience versus our free will. People have always asked, how is it possible for us to have free will, when God already knows what we're going to choose? But looking at the world this way, there's no contradiction. We do have free will. At every point, we choose which path our soul will follow. And at the same time, Hashem knows all the paths that can be traversed, and in fact are being traversed, however astronomical or even infinite the number. Since he is not bound by time, he can see every path simultaneously, and all the different souls that are traversing each one. The paradox is solved.
I am currently only about 2/3 of the way through the novel, so it is in principle possible that the characters' views will evolve and they will arrive at some very different solution to the paradox. However, given that this proposal is presented as a brilliant discovery, and given that parallel universes containing alternate versions of historical people who have made different choices go on to become central to the plot, this seems unlikely. My response? I have flirted with parallel universe theories myself, see lives, the universes, and everything, and am not opposed to the idea in principle. However, I think Rabbi Behr's proposal fails in two important ways. First, it fails to reconcile free will with omniscience. Second, it undermines the basis for any morality driven by love and concern for others rather than by selfishness. According to the theory, when I make a decision, I am not choosing which of two possible outcomes will be realized. Both will be realized, regardless of which I subjectively experience myself as choosing. Every time two roads diverge in a yellow wood, I travel both, and do so by not remaining one traveler. One version of me makes the one choice, and another equally real and otherwise identical version of me makes the other. Which is me, and which is the clone? If the question is meaningless, and each is equally me, then I have no free will. Everything that I can do, I unavoidably will do, and I thus have no ability to choose to do one thing rather than another. If there is a meaningful distinction between me and the clone, then God is not omniscient. If I choose path A, he will immediately create a clone of me which has chosen path B. If I choose path B, he will immediately create a clone of me which has chosen path A, but he doesn't know in advance which path I will choose and which clone he will have to create. My own choice, see the supergod delusion, has been to embrace the reality of free will and to reject the omniscience of God. Rabbi Behr thinks he has found a way to have his cake and eat it, too, but, well, I guess, technically, he has. According to his theory, a different version of me in a parallel universe has made the other choice and is a Calvinist or something. You can, with no logical inconsistency, accept both free will and omniscience, but only in two parallel universes, and not as one traveler. Much more serious, in my opinion, are the moral ramifications of Rabbi Behr's theory. By his theory, everything that can happen will happen, and the only choice I make is which of these continually proliferating parallel universes I will subjectively experience as my universe. That means that my experience is the only thing that can be affected by my choices. The pain and happiness experienced by other people cannot in any way be affected by my choices and thus can be excluded from consideration when I make decisions. The novel comes close to making this explicit.
I feel sorry for the version of my soul that took the wrong choices, though, said Ari wistfully. As you should, said Rabbi White. And hope you're not ever the one who took the wrong path. From your perspective, you want to make sure you're always taking the high road. But still, it's not nice to think that there's another me somewhere in a different reality who's messing up my life. It's not you, Reb Ari. It's someone else.
That's what morality comes down to in this model, make sure it's someone else who messes up his life, not you. Because if it's not you, it will be some other poor schlemiel. I almost used the more vulgar Yiddish word that comes naturally to me as an American, but I checked myself, knowing that an Orthodox rabbi is going to be reading this. You're welcome, Rabbi. The total suffering and happiness in the multiverse is fated and absolutely unalterable, regardless of which of its constituent timelines you choose to experience subjectively. What about people who are already someone else in the conventional sense? What we do can have no effect on their experience whatsoever. Let's say I am tempted to do something that would benefit me but harm John. Whatever I choose, both possibilities will be realized, each in its own parallel universe. In one universe, John is hurt and I benefit. In the other, John is not hurt and I do not benefit. When it comes to me, one of these two selves I will experience subjectively, while the other will be someone else, but whichever I choose, both Johns will be equally someone else. If I do the right thing and choose not to harm John, John will still be harmed anyway, in a parallel universe, but another person's subjective experience is already a parallel universe as far as I am concerned. Whatever I do, there will be a universe in which John is harmed and another, equally real, universe in which he is not harmed. My only choice is which of these two I will experience subjectively. Seeing that the result for the two Johns will be the same either way, why would I choose anything other than the one that is best for me? I assume that Rabbi Behr's answer would be that God will judge and punish the version of me that chooses to harm John, and so it is not ultimately in my self-interest to do so. But why would God punish me for doing something that harmed no one? Remember, the harm to John would have been exactly the same if I had made the right choice. I'm not really doing anything by the choices I make, I'm just choosing which of two eternally existing timelines I'm going to look at.